Hey everybody, I'm Joshua Orro, the Mustang Prince, and welcome to Mustang Prince Orro Reports. You know, in my opinion, one of the best things about the Halloween season is watching classic monster flicks on TV or at the movie theaters. But aside from monster films, there's also awesome alien films to watch during this spooky season too. And sometimes, while I do like to watch the classics, I also like to see how other filmmakers do their own take on the horror B flicks and sci-fi genres. Some examples being films by Tim Burton or Mel Brooks. Also, a couple weeks ago, I blogged the Rocky Horror Picture Show, which is another great example of a film that both parodies and pays tribute to these two genres. However, the film I'll be blogging tonight is an animated film from Dreamworks Animation that I've been wanting to share ever since my first season back in 2013. But, does it still hold up today? Well, let's see. Released on March 27th, 2009, the movie is Monsters vs. Aliens. Now, on for the film's plot. When a meteorite from outer space hits a young California woman named Susan Murphy and turns her into a 50-foot giant, she is taken to a secret government compound where she meets a ragtag group of monsters who were also rounded up over the past 50 years. Not long afterwards, an extraterrestrial robot lands on Earth and begins a rampage. In response, General W.R. Monger persuades the President of the United States to send Susan and the other monsters to battle the machine and the evil alien overlord Galaxar and save the planet from imminent destruction. So, what do I think of the movie? Well, this has got to be my all-time favorite film from Dreamworks Animation, and another one of my favorite films to watch during the Halloween season. And to further explain why I love this movie, let's move on to Mustang notes. The film was directed by Conrad Vernon and Rob Letterman, who had also wrote the screenplay with Maya Forbes, Wallace Wolodarski, and the writing team of Jonathan Abel and Glenn Berger. The film started out as an adaptation of a horror comic book called Rex Havoc, in which a monster hunter Rex and his team of experts called Ass Kickers of the Fantastic fight against ghouls, ghosts, and other creatures. The earliest development goes back to 2002, when DreamWorks first filed for a Rex Havoc trademark. In a plot synopsis revealed in 2005, the main character Rex was to assemble a team of monsters to fight aliens for disrupting cable TV service. In the following years, the film's story diverged away from the original Rex Havoc, with directors Conrad Vernon and Rob Letterman finally creating the storyline from scratch. Production designer David James stated that the movie is a return to what made us nerds in the first place, getting classic movie monsters and relaunching them in a contemporary setting. Director Vernon added that he found it would be a great idea to take hideous monsters and give them personalities and satirize the archetypes. After the film was released, it received generally positive reviews from critics, and it grossed about $381 million worldwide on a $175 million budget. And while it didn't get a sequel yet, the film started a franchise consisting of a short film called Bob's Big Break, as well as two TV specials called Mutant Pumpkins from Outer Space and Night of the Living Carrots, and a TV series which premiered on Nickelodeon in 2013, and it lasted for one season. As for the animation, well, while it has aged a bit over the past 14 years, I still think it looks great. Plus, I think it's pretty cool that this was DreamWorks Animation's first feature film to be directly produced in a stereotypic 3D format instead of being converted into 3D after completion, which added about $15 million to the film's budget. Speaking of which, this was the very first real 3D film that I ever saw in theaters, not counting films like Spy Kids 3D or The Adventures of Shark Boy and Lava Girl. And in my opinion, that experience was absolutely awesome. Plus, I like that this movie mostly takes place in Modesto, California, which is about 6 hours away from where I live. And I also like that it has an entire ship full of references to classic sci-fi and horror films from the 1950s to the 1970s. Sadly, I don't want to list them all right now, otherwise we'd be here all night. But the ones that I can mention is a scene that talked about the Invisible Man, whom was said to have gotten out of Area 51, but in reality, he actually died of a heart attack 25 years prior in a chair. There's also an E.T. reference where the military tries to take down a robot probe, but to no avail, due to said robot having a deflector shield, and the San Francisco fight between the probe and the monsters, which I thought was the most thrilling part of the movie, felt reminiscent to It Came From Beneath the Sea. Only it has a giant octopus instead of a giant robot. And I thought the final climax on Galaxar's spaceship was both heart-pounding, comical, badass, and awesome. Plus, I also like that this film features pretty good dance songs like Roses Are Red by Aqua and Axel F by Harold Faltermeyer. And now, let's move on to the characters and the voice actors who brought him to life. Our main character, Susan Murphy, aka Ginormica, is voiced by Reese Witherspoon, whom I remember from the Legally Blonde films, Richard Rich's animated version of The Trumpet of the Swan, along with 2006's Penelope, 2018's A Wrinkle in Time, and Illumination's Sing movies. Susan is a young woman from Modesto, California, who was hit by a radioactive quantonium meteorite on her wedding day, causing her to change drastically and grow to a 50-foot giantess, which makes her pretty similar to Nancy Archer from Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. Not only that, but her exposure to quantonium also makes her hair color change from brown to white, and it gives her super strength and physical imperviousness. In my opinion, Susan is smart, friendly, beautiful, somewhat meek, and very sympathetic. And after becoming a 50-foot monster and getting locked up in Area 51, she initially wants nothing more than to return to her old life. But thankfully, as the film progresses, she gradually warms up to her status as a giant. Now let's move on to Susan's monster friends and teammates, starting with Dr. Cockroach, PhD, voiced by the comical Hugh Laurie, whom I remember from the Stuart Little trilogy, The Borrowers, The World of Peter Rabbit and Friends, the 1996 101 Dalmatians remake, 2005's Valiant, 2015's Tomorrowland, Illumination's Hop, Aardman's Arthur Christmas, and just recently, The Amazing Maurice. Dr. Cockroach is a brilliant scientist who invented a scientific machine to give him the cockroach's ability to survive. Unfortunately, there was a side effect that gave him the head and the abilities of a real cockroach, which makes him like a mix of the Fly and the Curse of Frankenstein. Now to me, Dr. Cockroach is an awesome character, due to him being highly intelligent, charming, polite, and a very sophisticated man. He can also climb high walls, he can build a supercomputer out of a pizza box, 2 cans of hairspray, and a paperclip. He builds a rocket car in San Francisco, And he also has a habit of bursting into a maniacal laugh. Plus, it should also be noted that Dr. Cockroach is an expert dancer, which happens to be his PhD. And I like how he uses his dancing skills, DDR style, while hacking through Galaxar's core computer and set his ship to self-destruct. Next up is benzoyl bicarbonate, or B.O.B for short, voiced by Seth Rogen. B.O.B is an indestructible gelatinous mass created when a tomato was injected with a genetically modified ranch-flavored dessert topping, which makes him kind of reminiscent to the Blob, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, and the Crawling Eye. Now, B.O.B can devour and digest almost any substance, and he can form into any shape. And despite having a consciousness, he literally and figuratively lacks a brain, and is thus the comic relief of the entire movie. Plus, a couple of my favorite scenes involving B.O.B is the part where he eats the road dividers on the Golden Gate Bridge so that the drivers can evacuate, and when he thinks of a plan for him and his friends to get to Susan without being seen by disguising themselves as Galaxar clones. However, I thought it was kind of weird when B.O.B flirts with an inanimate blob of gelatin, which he subsequently dubbed as Diane, and the part where he references Shakespeare in Love by pointing at Susan's front kind of made me cringe. Here we have the missing Link, voiced by Will Arnett. Link is a 20,000-year-old fish-ape humanoid who was found frozen and thawed out by scientists, only to escape and wreak havoc at his old lagoon habitat of Cocoa Beach, Florida, which makes him reminiscent to the creature from the Black Lagoon, King Kong, and The Thing. Plus, he behaves as a macho jock most of the time, but he's unfortunately out of shape, and he's an expert martial artist. And while he can be pretty reckless at times, I think Link is a born leader while leading the other monsters in battle. Next on our list is Insectosaurus, the biggest and last member of the monsters, whose vocals are provided by Conrad Vernon. Insecto was a small grub that was transformed and mutated by nuclear radiation into a 350-foot tall monstrous silkworm that attacked Tokyo. Now, Insecto's characteristics are similar to the Angry Red Planet, Godzilla, and Mothra, and I think her relationship with Link is kind of reminiscent to King Kong versus Godzilla. Also, I find her to be the most gentlest monster in the entire movie. Plus, aside from having the ability to shoot sticky web-like silk out of her nose and being easily mesmerized by bright lights, I like the part where she uses her powerful pincers to pull the Golden Gate Bridge back into place, and where she tried to save Susan from being abducted, only to sadly get shot down by Galaxar's spaceship. But fortunately, she doesn't stay dead for long, because after she emerges from a cocoon, she becomes Butterflyosaurus with the ability to fly, and she becomes the monster's mode of transportation. As for the other characters, we have General W.R. Monger, voiced by Kiefer Sutherland, whom was in The Nutcracker Prince, Disney's The Wild, the 10th Land Before Time movie, and 2014's Pompeii movie. Now, Monger is the military leader who runs the top secret facility where the monsters are kept. After the robot probe lands on Earth, Monger comes up with a plan to send the monsters to battle and defeat it, and in exchange, the monsters will be granted their freedom by order of the President of the United States. To me, Monger is a well-prepared man, hence why he always wears a parachute, and while he started out as their warden, I think he makes a great supporting character for the monsters. Plus, I also find it surprising that Monger is 90 years old in spite of his youthful appearance. Another character to talk about is Susan's ex-fiancé, Derek Deedle, voiced by Scott Lang himself, Paul Rudd. Derek is a local weatherman who jumps at whatever opportunity he has to boost his career, which causes him to place his job and himself before his relationship with Susan, canceling their plans to have a romantic honeymoon in Paris to land an anchorman job in Fresno, and eventually ending their engagement. You know, now that I think about it, if I ever gained a special someone to share a relationship with, I would never let a job or my future conflict with it. Anyway, at the end of the movie, Susan gets her revenge on Derek by publicly humiliating him on camera. Last but not least, we come to the film's main villain, Galaxar, voiced by Rainn Wilson, whom was the evil Gargamel in Smurfs the Lost Village, Lex Luthor in 3 of the animated DC films, and Dr. Demento in Weird, the Al Yankovic story, which will be getting a physical home media release this holiday season. Now, Galaxar is an evil alien overlord intent on collecting quantonium, the very substance that transforms Susan into Ginormica to give his cloning machine enough power to generate an army to conquer Earth in order to rebuild his former civilization by exterminating human beings and enslaving the survivors. Plus, on board his ship, Galaxar is served by gigantic robot probes and a user-friendly computer. Now, in my personal opinion, Galaxar is a power-hungry and an outer galactic threat, due to him terrorizing Earth, sending a robot probe to attack San Francisco, and injuring Insectosaurus. Plus, I also find him to be pretty similar to the aliens from Tim Burton's Mars Attacks, along with Roland Emmerich's Independence Day and H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. Plus, in a couple scenes, Galaxar makes references to films like To Be or Not to Be, along with Alien, Destroy All Monsters, and Mel Brooks' Spaceballs. Also, I find the part where he claims to have suffered several traumas in his youth and that he destroyed his previous home planet to be a bit weird, confusing, and unintelligible, mainly due to him telling Susan the whole situation while being repeatedly photocopied to create his clones. Other voice actors in the film include Amy Poehler as Galaxar's computer, Jeffrey Tambor and Julie White as Susan's parents, Carl and Wendy, and Stephen Colbert as U.S. President Hathaway. And now on to my final words. Overall, Monsters vs. Aliens is a fun movie, and it's got to be one of DreamWorks' best ever. The animation is great for the time. It has clever and hilarious humor, mostly. It has badass action scenes. The main characters are memorable, lovable, and sympathetic. The villain is very threatening, but pretty silly at times. The voice actors are all fantastic, and the whole film truly makes a great tribute to the classic horror and sci-fi flicks. So, if you haven't seen this movie yet, be sure to check it out, especially during the Halloween season. And be sure to share it with your friends, your children, and your whole family. I give it a full 100%. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to join me next time where we journey into the multiverse of madness with Doctor Strange. Mustang power.